I'm here today in the excellent offices of Matrix Digital in Mount Cook in Wellington. And I'm here to talk about methamphetamine. And I'm talking about methamphetamine on my podcast, Different Matters, with Benedict Collins. Benedict, thanks for making the time.
You're welcome.
All right, methamphetamine, fantastic topic.
I
love methamphetamine, metaphorically speaking.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever tried it. I had a speedball in university when I was about 19, I think was the last time I tried. And I went on a 3-day bender. And at the end of that 3 days, I said, I can never do this again.
Right, yes.
And it's like 40 years ago. And I can still remember the joy that anyway, we're not here to talk about reminiscence about that. Have you tried methamphetamine?
It wasn't really around in my partying days.
What do you mean? You're still young in your partying days.
No.
That's almighty.
It's a long time now.
Yeah, okay. That's not the rumours that I'm about to spread.
Right.
Okay, let's talk. You have written an excellent book on methamphetamine. And it's still available. I don't think it's not in the bookshops, but you can buy it from Mighty Ape and Fish Pond. Let's talk about the history of methamphetamines, because to understand our current madness and the current regime and why the Indonesians occasionally murder young boys and why rugby league stars get into all sorts of trouble with this stuff, I think we need to understand the background and the history of methamphetamine. So let's go all the way back. Where did this stuff come from? Let's talk about the crazy Japanese guy and the Germans who stumbled across synthetic cannabis.
Yeah, so I think basically the story goes that 1936 Olympics, we had a whole bunch of athletes who are basically taking amphetamine pills and to boost their performance, right?
Yes.
Big upper, huge boost of energy. And then basically after that, the German scientists went away and said, I wonder if we could do anything a little bit better than that.
That's good.
Yeah. So they went back and basically looked back decades earlier. Some Japanese scientists had basically figured out how to synthesize basically the active ingredient in the ephedra plant, which is
a herbal remedy that the Japanese used.
Well, in Asian culture, right, it had always been kind of like, you've got a cold or whatever, you can put ephedra into your tea and it kind of clears up the sinuses.
And this was like a plant.
Correct. Yeah. Grows like right across Asia and Afghanistan and places like that. So yeah, basically they'd taken out the active ingredient. They hadn't really figured out what it was useful for. They went back, had a look, found this, figured out it was even more powerful than amphetamines.
Yes.
And that's kind of how methamphetamine was born. Pretty quickly it became a really quite popular drug used by not only athletes, but housewives and stuff. It was marketed to them in Germany, help you get through the day, get on top of your chores, and then of course they rolled it out for like the Nazi troops en masse, right?
Heidelberg, you're talking about Heidelberg chocolates.
Yeah. Get your methamphetamine in chocolate and
always
away you go.
A delight.
Yeah.
Some of the ads are available online for Heidelberg chocolate. They're fantastic. Just coming back though, so this was a synthetic product. So help me understand that. So they had a plant that had some of these properties.
Yeah.
But what they looked at the chemical component of it and says we can replicate that.
Yeah. So basically, one of the scientists here was getting the ephedra plant, and he was like getting a mortar and pestle and kind of like grinding it up, and noticed all these little crystals had started forming when he was like kind of grinding it up, and was like, ooh. And then basically, kind of synthesized that from there.
So he worked out what the chemical ingredients were, and then because the cooks today, they don't need the actual plant.
No, correct. No, you can synthesize it completely artificially now, right? It's one of those. It's like lots of other drugs that we've figured out how to do that with, right?
Which from a manufacturing perspective is great because
it's fantastic. Yeah, if you want to churn out vast quantities of a drug, it's so much more efficient, right, than having to like grow
plants,
a cannabis plant or cocaine en masse, where your crops are subject. It's a lot easier for the law enforcement to find them or for them to be taken out by bad weather or pests or diseases.
And the Americans go and fly pesticides, not pesticides, what do they call it, herbicides or whatever, to kill your crop.
Well, the New Zealand cops do that too, right? With cannabis. And it's just so much easier because you don't, you're not relying on plants. And what we're seeing now with methamphetamine, right, is you can always kind of tweak. You can come up with all these designer chemicals and lots of other drugs as well, like ketamine and stuff like that. You can come up with lots of basically kind of the early parts of the ingredients, and you can keep tweaking them to get around.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah, law enforcement.
The New Zealand's first real engagement with this stuff, though, was Crete in 1941. So that was when, good old God Zone, we came across a whole bunch of crazy Germans.
We did. Yeah. They started like parachuting down upon our troops. These guys were all like,
dope to the eyeballs.
Yeah. And we had, it was quite funny. I dealt with, I interviewed descendants of a soldier who'd been over there, and he had basically got a little tin of what they thought might have been those kind of crazy pet pills.
Yeah.
And it was all in German, but I had a friend, so they'd showed me taking a photo of this little container of pills that had now all totally rotted over the last 80 odd years or whatever. But yeah, it turned out just to be like vitamin E pills. They weren't the methamphetamine ones. Yeah.
Okay, right. So the Germans.
Yes.
So leading up to the 1939 war, they had worked out that these amphetamines were great for the purpose of getting their soldiers to just keep going.
Yeah.
And so they could rip down through Belgium and the Netherlands and go into France.
And overrun everyone in a matter of days, right?
Yeah, and it's great. You quote a German pilot. It's quite a long quote. I'm going to read that part of it. It's really, I like the clarity. One pilot described taking the drug. The engine is running cleanly and calmly. I'm wide awake. My heartbeat thunders in my ears. When the sky is suddenly so bright, my eyes hurt from the harsh light. Everything becomes immaterial and abstract, remote, as if I was flying above my plane. Kind of gives you a sense of what it was like. He's high. He's
super high.
Yeah. In both sense of the word, this guy is high.
Yeah.
So we had a whole. We were facing battalion after battalion of doped up super troops.
Yeah, we were.
This is like the Tour de France, just en masse.
Yeah.
The Nazi Tour de France.
It really was.
Methamphetamine.
And they still kind of do it today with Air Force pilots. Funnily enough.
Really?
Yeah, they still give them what they call them go pills now, but they're still giving them like US, particularly the ones flying like long range missions. They're giving them what they're calling go pills. Like powerful amphetamines before they fly, and then when they land, they basically get given sleeping pills. And some US pilots blew up a bunch of Canadian soldiers in Afghanistan, and then blamed it on the Canadians were training in like a campground that they'd taken off from the Taliban. US came through, dropped a 500-pound bomb on them from high above, and blamed it on the amphetamines they were given.
The defence worked, didn't it?
I think maybe they got a dishonourable discharge, one of them, or something like that. Yeah.
I mean, dropping a whole bunch of bombs on Canadians does seem somewhat unkind.
It does.
But, okay, all right. So coming up, this is before the whole madness starts.
Yep.
So in New Zealand, we discovered the advantage of this product. So we're talking about benzene, which was widely available in New Zealand, and we were using it for what?
Yeah, so we had a bunch of different kind of amphetamine pills that we were basically prescribing largely for weight loss in New Zealand. We also had...
Does it work? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah, I think it was rather successful. And then they also brought out basically methamphetamine pills as well that you could, the doctors would give prescribed to you.
Oh, you still needed a prescription?
Often doctors, would prescribe it to you, basically to help with weight loss, and that was pretty common in New Zealand for a couple of decades.
When I was a student many years ago now, must have been in the late 80s.
Yep.
We would buy a product called No Dose.
Yeah.
which I'm pretty sure had probably, maybe pseudoephedrine or something in it.
Yes.
Pseudoephedrine's what, a weak version of methamphetamine? It's not the real McCoy, is it? Or is it completely different?
You can make methamphetamine from pseudoephedrine, but it's pretty different.
Right, okay.
Yeah,
So it doesn't give you that. It won't allow you to invade France.
Oh, no, but it helps you get over your cold or your flu, doesn't it? Clears up the sinuses. Yeah, so, you get ephedrine that you can synthesize meth from.
But in the background, there was some negative stories starting to appear, all right? So one of them is in the Tour de France. We're talking, I think you talk about one where they say that we ride on dynamite from the 1924s. And so the Tour de France is like 22 days, and you got to be riding 6-8 hours a day. And you quote some guys from the 20s. A sober human being cannot do the Tour de France. You have to be on something.
You have to be a little bit juiced.
You have to be a little bit juiced. Then we come across to the British rider Tommy Simpson, who was going gangbusters on the tour. He was right at the top of it was almost at the top of some hill, whatever. Yeah. Collapses and dies.
Yeah. So I think I kind of had a look over. Back in the 20s, they were all taking cocaine and they had whiskey in their drink bottles. The shit was going. But then basically,
a bit like the press gallery today.
Indeed. And they had basically several riders die, basically just taking so much methamphetamine that you just overheat. Basically, because you're just going and going and going, and your temperature's not regulating like it normally would. Your body doesn't back off when you're under that kind of extreme stress. They just kind of.
I think you write or you quote something in the book that fatigue is the body's instruction to stop.
Yeah.
And that one of the side effects, this product turns that signal off, so you don't stop.
You can overdo it. Yeah.
And as Tommy Simpson did in 1967, he died.
Yeah.
But then the Americans had the Vietnam War.
Yep.
And just like the Germans, they started massively prescribing them. Well, did they?
It was a lot of amphetamines.
Was that a US government policy, or was just the black market?
I don't know that it was ever official policy, but they're doing it en masse, right? It's not a bad idea if you've got troops out in the jungle who need to stay alert for,
Well, because you say here the US military adopted the dexedrine and amphetamine and ordered 200 million doses between 66 and 69.
Yeah.
So the Americans were prescribing just as the Nazis had, just as the Tour de France people had. Everybody was using this stuff. You also write that after the Japanese defeat in World War II, something like 1 to 1.5% of the population was abusing these products.
Yeah, because they were using huge amounts of methamphetamine as well, and then basically after
during the war as well.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Their pilots, a lot of their pilots were, and then when their sort of society collapsed after they lost the war, they had massive addiction problems because all the methamphetamine supplies that they had basically just flooded out into the kind of general populace, and they had big, huge numbers of people using meth, very few jobs. It was kind of a bit of a social.
Maybe that was the foundation point of the Japanese economic miracle. That's what got them to the.
Took a while, yeah.
Yeah, but they were starting from effectively a zero base. I mean, the country was bombed.
Yeah.
And then they methamphetamine themselves. Okay, all right. No, that's probably not true. It's a good story. But again, we're starting to get some negative stuff in New Zealand. I like this. Well, I don't like the story. It's a tragedy. Charlie Oliver, who was the shearer.
Yeah.
So we're talking 1955. He's 35 years old. He's entering a shearing competition. Now, this is number of sheep you can shear in 9 hours. I looked it up. The current record is 872, right? So I don't know if the guy doing that is sober. But Charlie Oliver was chasing 456 sheep. He was high.
Yeah, he was popping Benzedrine, right, which is the amphetamine, popping them all day long. And like you said, you could get these at the chemists back then, right? And back then, going for a world sharing title was like quite a big deal. Like, they talked about the woolshed being like packed out, people like up in the rafters so that they could watch his shearing attempt. But it was the same kind of, same kind of thing that you see with athletes on the Tour de France, where he's just going and going and going, and basically overheated, dehydrated, walked out of the woolshed, collapsed, and died.
And died. Okay, but so whilst we have these negative things happening,
Yep.
this product is being used extensively in New Zealand and around the world.
Yep.
Millions of people are taking this product around the world.
Yep.
And other than the occasional evidence of abuse, it's going all right. I mean, isn't it? Is there? I mean, other than these, I mean, what starts the general move? Because you talk about it was 1970. The Misuse of Drug Acts was the Misuse of Drugs Act or legislation was passed. We was talking before. Jonathan Hunt is saying this won't work, but still voted for it.
Yeah.
So what was it around the late 60s, early 70s that New Zealand decided we need to do something about?
Yeah. So the manufacturers, the people who are selling, the methamphetamine-based medications here in New Zealand had noticed there were problems. Not big problems, but problems with quite a number of people who were taking the methamphetamine pills for weight loss, ending up getting addicted. So they'd actually chosen to withdraw that from the market.
The pharmaceutical companies had.
Correct. Yep. So and we started to get lots and lots of chemists, which kind of continues to today, getting robbed as well for their supplies of amphetamines and methamphetamine pills. Back in the 60s, that really took off, robberies of chemists. So the manufacturers had actually taken it off the market here. But yeah, and then in the early 70s, you started to see kind of global efforts to crack down on various substances, which led to that Misuse of Drugs Act.
So why does it change? I mean, you talk about Richard Nixon and his war on drugs, but why? I mean, why did we take a product that was widely used and criminalise it? Was it just? Can we blame Tricky Dicky for it, or was there other stuff?
Yeah. So obviously, over in the United States, you had a whole lot of domestic politics going on. About Mexicans coming over the border and marijuana coming over the border and stuff that
they
led
no
to
longer have that problem, though, do they?
No. I think that's all. I think it's all resolved. Big issues with marijuana. You also had, just thinking of timeline here. People coming back from Vietnam. A lot of people, drugs were a problem there. A lot of people coming back from Vietnam hooked on heroin.
Yes.
So that was kind of the climate in the United States. They kind of pursued global efforts to crack down on illegal drugs, and that kind of fed out all around the world.
It's interesting because we're talking Jonathan Hunt, who was Labor.
Yep.
Was he Speaker at one point?
He was. Yeah.
He's now passed, sadly, but he made the comment at the time, this won't work, and yet he still voted for it.
He did. Yeah. So it passed through, and it remains to this day. Oh, Misuse of Drugs Act keeps getting tweaked, but still around.
But initially, amphetamines were not Class A. That only happened under John Key, didn't it? Or was that?
Well, that's with methamphetamine, right? So yeah, it kind of it moved around, and then I think in the wake of was it the William Bell up in the RSA in Auckland
and Tony Dixon,
the samurai, those kind of high profile crimes that kind of
when was the Burroughs child killed? When did she die?
Oh,
that was a bit later.
Was it about 2000 and was it 2000 and?
Were those about the same time?
3?
Okay, we'll come back to her. Let's talk about the mood in New Zealand really starts to change.
Yep.
So we're talking about William Bell, who was notorious for the murders he committed in the RSA, 2001.
Yeah.
Looks like he's still alive and still in prison.
Yep.
And how do you say his name? Antonone?
Tony Dixon, yeah.
Who cares, Dixon? Yeah. He's dead.
Yeah.
One of his victims described his death in 2009 as a gift.
Yes. That was the woman whose hand he chopped off.
So let's talk about that, because these two individuals define how I think most still, either directly or indirectly, these two individuals have defined how we think about methamphetamine.
Yeah, I think a couple of really high-profile crimes rocked the country. But and it did, you're definitely right, it did kind of set in the public mind that this is a drug that makes people go crazy, it's a killer drug. But what you also had at around that time, right, because we've talked about how, methamphetamine came off the, legal methamphetamine was kind of like off the shelves by the early 70s.
Yep.
But it was actually in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, that what happened is people figured out that they could cook it themselves, right, and cook it in kitchens, cook it in garages. And so we went from having almost no methamphetamine labs being busted to like a couple of hundred a year being busted. Some were exploding, and then you have these really high-profile crimes connected to it. So it did kind of out of nowhere. It really did bubble up in the late 90s, and that's.
But why? Given that in the years leading up to this, like tens of thousands of New Zealanders were taking benzene and similar products.
Yep.
You also write about is it Hoff? Some guy in Sydney who runs the Needle Exchange, who said something like 80,000 people have used his Needle Exchange in a 4-year period, and there's been no acts of violence. I mean, arguably he would say that, but nonetheless, there's a lot of evidence that people are taking these products and not committing murders.
Yeah.
What happened in the case of Bell and Dixon? What was it? Was it the nature of the product? Were they using?
Well, I think it's a bit clearer with Tony Dixon what happened, and he was just using vast amounts of methamphetamine, and from a very young age. I mean, he'd been, spent years and years being abused in boys' homes and in and out of prison nonstop, using vast amounts of drugs, going like crazy, right? Thinking, that 747s were following him.
So he was possibly psychotic before he started taking them.
Oh, he was damaged, and and I think it definitely didn't help. And just there was all sorts of crazy stuff. That he thought he was, sitting at the kitchen table, digging into his arms with knives, trying to get bugs out of his arms, that kind of thing.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's a bit like the murder of Burroughs, which happened, I think, a little bit later.
Yeah.
So she was a young girl who was murdered by her stepfather, Williams.
Yep.
He attempted to blame the meth for the problem, but in the book you kind of dismiss that and say, well, no, I won't go to the details of murder, it's too grim. Okay, so, and leading up to this, that's when we have John Key enters the stage, and really ramps it up, and he says, while he was Prime Minister, the government to the gangs, the government is coming after your business, and we will use every tool we have to destroy it. We will be ruthless in our pursuit of you and the evil drug you push. So this is 2009.
Yep.
Methamphetamine gets upgraded to a Class A drug.
Yep.
And then in New Zealand, the war on P really starts. How does it go?
So it had been raging for a while, though, right? And what Key did when he made that speech is that's when they banned pseudoephedrine out of our cold and flu medicines, right? And basically got it off the shelves. And because people, like they'd been robbing the chemists decades ago to get, the pure product. Now they were robbing chemists left, right and centre to get, your cold Drex, to get those cold and flu medications. Then you could take the pseudoephedrine out of it and cook your own methamphetamine. So that's a really, like, moving up to Class A, whoop-de-doo, that doesn't have any, impact on the decisions people make. But it did appear to be pretty effective taking pseudoephedrine off the shelves, right? And the number of meth labs started falling. And we'd also had, like, in health surveys, about 3% of people were using methamphetamine a year in the early 2000s. And that kind of fell down to about 1% of people. So it did initially look like it had been successful. But lots of other countries around the world were doing this at the same time. They were getting pseudoephedrine off the shelves to try and stop home cooking of methamphetamine. And what happened is what always happens with drugs is like the drug market just evolves, right? And all of a sudden you get groups up in Myanmar and the Golden Triangle like, hey, we can make a lot of this really pretty cheaply ourselves. And they just start pumping out, tons upon tons upon tons of methamphetamine out of Myanmar. Now we've got out of Mexico as well. It's just like not so much home cooking anymore. It's just done on a global scale. And I think in recent years we've had around, like, authorities are seizing around 400 tons a year around the world. And so if that's what they're seizing, you can imagine
it's a peaceful percentage.
It's probably 90% more than that moving around freely.
There's you quote in the book a 2012 Herald story, which is still online. It's great. And this looks to be a Herald editorial in 2012, right? 3 years after John Key does his pseudoephedrine ban. And the Herald says, "It is not often that a nation succeeds in defeating a criminal drug, yet that is what this country has practically achieved in its battle against methamphetamine, the narcotic that reached epidemic proportions in the last 2 decades, finding addicts among the wealthy and the poor, and fueling some of the most crazed and violent crimes on record, has been reduced to a trickle." I mean, they were just that aged so badly.
Yeah, it sure did. Yeah, I mean, yeah.
So the market, you got to love the market. The market responded. And the market responded by setting up, rather than having small little labs based locally, to massive labs in the Shan state in Myanmar, Burma. And well, this is really interesting.
It's fascinating.
It's a semi-autonomous drug kingdom, the Shan state.
Yeah.
So they've got like about 12,000 troops. They have got a deal with the government in, what's the capital, Rangoon? I can't remember. No, anyway, whatever. So they've got a deal with the government in Myanmar to basically leave them alone. The government in Myanmar doesn't appear to have the resources to tackle them, or potentially the interest in tackling them. So you have a semi-independent narco-state operating in the that is the heart of the Golden Triangle. And you're talking about the company turning over about $24 billion a year, it looks like.
Yeah, and it's kind of fascinating how the drugs get into up into that part of Myanmar as well, right? Because they're all coming out of, or a lot of it was coming out of factories in China where they're making those designer kind of precursor chemicals, and then they're managing to kind of smuggle those over the border into Myanmar, and then it just comes out through Thailand. It just starts flooding out across the world.
It's not as impressive as McDonald's in terms of an international, but this is the market at work.
Yeah,
and the local authorities in various places are completely impotent against it. But talking from a New Zealand perspective, so there's a lot of stuff. You talk about some very large shipments, drugs coming into through the airport is dressed up as some form of herbal tea. So what's the mechanism now for the methamphetamine coming into the country?
How's it getting in now?
I mean, there was a story a few years ago about some crazy guys on a boat up in Northland. Half a ton of stuff.
Half a ton.
I mean, that's like comedy.
And
but
it was, right, because none of them knew how to
land a boat,
or drive a boat, or whatever you do with a motorboat. None of them knew how to work it. They were trying to get.
Still nearly got there.
They were trying to get locals to show them how to launch their boat. They just when they eventually did make it out and received their meth, and they came and just like drove the boat onto the sand and left it. So everyone was like, "What the hell is going on?" Yeah, half a ton. Kind of like of amateurs collecting half a ton of meth. But now, I mean, pretty much every week you're seeing people getting stopped just with maybe 10, 20 kilos, landing at the airport in their luggage. You've got tons coming in, through the ports. I mean, our wastewater meth testing results has gone ballistic in the last year. They reckon the amount of meth being consumed in New Zealand domestically has almost doubled, going off wastewater testing results. So that's from about 18, 19 kilos a week up to like the mid-30s kilos per week around the country. That's quite a lot of meth.
That's metric tons of the stuff. So we're not getting on top of this stuff. Let's stay a little bit. Let's talk about this organisation called The Company.
Yeah.
So talk about that, because I think that highlights the scale of the problem.
Yeah. So this is basically a bunch of numerous different kind of Yakuza / triad / big Asian gangs working together just to distribute vast quantities of drugs, including methamphetamine, across the planet, basically. And yeah, they recently caught one of the bosses. I think they caught him up at Schiphol Airport in Amsterdam. And then they extradited him down to Australia, eh?
Tai Tishi Lop or whatever.
Yeah, Taiwanese guy, I think. But yeah, those are their kind of signature mark is those green tea packets. So all around the world, meth will get intercepted, and it's always packaged up in green tea bags.
They must change them around pretty frequently.
Yeah, often it is green tea, but I'm sure they've got multiple different methods of getting it in.
And so but it's also interesting because you also write about an incident in an adjacent province in China, where the Chinese authorities eventually decide to go in there and was it Boshi
Village? Yeah, this is just fantastic. It's like just about every single person living in this village was making meth. And the local Communist Party, like, officials were, like, donkey deep in it. And the Chinese police tried to raid them multiple times. And they would get tip-offs that they were coming. And, like, the whole village would go out and surround the cops when they got there. It would be like they had, like, homemade crossbows they were firing at them. And they'd put down, like, boards filled with nails everywhere to puncture their tires and, like, repelled the Chinese raids, like, again and again. And we're just, producing vast quantities of methamphetamine. And I can see you've got a photo there that we got from the book. And it's like these, just to describe it to people listening, there's all these Chinese troops there. Eventually they came in with like overwhelming force and choppers and jammed all the signals in the town. And you've got these troops who are shit scared because they're walking through these very narrow tunnels, carrying out vast quantities of like the precursor chemicals and acids and stuff that they were using in meth. And what they were really worried about is that the villagers were just going to tip more acid off the top of the roofs down onto them as they're moving through the thing. Now you can go to Bosch Village and there's no men there anymore, apparently. Yeah, they
hauled them all off, arrested
them. Yeah,
them.
they've taken media tours there and they're like, where are all the men? Yeah, so like between like 16 and 80, all the men got rounded up and off to prison.
That's really interesting because that is in a authority. Well, that 2013, I think China was probably more authoritarian than totalitarian as it is now. But even in a communist ruled authoritarian, totalitarian state, this product is so powerful and the money is so vast that again you have effectively a form of secession internally in a communist dictatorship. It is just remarkable how potent and powerful this stuff is, or the money involved in the things that people are prepared to do for it. Let's segue from there to Manu Vatawai. Okay, It's a nice segue, and I think, because I've written about him, and he was in your book. I watched him play. I got a box of the Warriors.
I've spent many a game there cheering for Manu.
Yep. And I was so he made the grand final once, and I was there. I think in 2011. We didn't win, unfortunately. But so here he is, a few years back. His rugby career has ended. He's got a real estate job. Life seems to be going reasonably well. And he decides, you know what? I'm going to have a crack at distribution or importing?
Well, importing, right?
methamphetamine?
I think they were having a mate send it over, I think from Africa, and sending over a few kilos at a time.
Yeah. And the thing that I find really interesting about this, and I've written and I wrote about it, so Manawatawai had choices. He had options. He wasn't on the bones of his ass. He had a good job, a good career, a good reputation. Now, there was an issue with his brother, which might complicate things. But the money was so good that he was prepared to risk it.
Yeah.
And this is where I think politicians like John Key and Jim Anderson just completely fail to comprehend what the reality here. If I'm 22 and I can see, okay, life's not going that well. I got a shitty job, I got a crappy job, working as a journalist, making fuck all money. I could make $500,000 a month by importing this stuff. If you've got no other options, some people are going to take that choice. Not very many. The vast majority of people are not going to. But we're always going to find Manawatawai and people like him to take the risk.
Yeah, of course. When and you look at New Zealand, where the price fluctuates a lot, but it's just so cheap overseas, right? You can buy a kilo of methamphetamine in parts of the world for a few $1,000s, right? And you bring it here, and it's depending on the day and the month, it could be worth
100,000, yeah. So because you're talking about it's about 400 USD in some place in Afghanistan. I can't remember the village you described. And at the time you were saying it's about 150,000 in New Zealand. Looks like it's a little bit less now.
Yeah.
But, I mean...
And it would have to pass through a lot of hands before it got to you, but that's kind of a decent markup, right?
But I could go to... Well, okay, I probably couldn't go to Afghanistan, but I mean, I could go somewhere and buy this for probably $10,000.
Yeah.
And it's $100,000 in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Right? And a kilo is not that bulky. I can smuggle it in somehow. People are going to take that chance, and Manawatawai did, right? And this is part of my frustration, because then we talk about the Bali Nine, right? So you had these two young men attracted to the money, and the thing is, if you put that, it's like a game of Russian roulette. If the money is big enough, somebody's going to roll the dice, and so these guys did, and the Indonesians got these two young men with decades in front of them, with their parents still begging for them, and they fired bullets into their living bodies. And what happened to the drug market?
Yeah, it keeps on getting bigger.
Keeps on getting bigger.
Yeah.
We are destroying lives for no good purpose. It infuriates me.
And people, especially people on low incomes, there's a bit in the book there, are really susceptible to being, used as traffickers or used as, people to take methamphetamine across borders. They end up spending years and years in various prisons, if not put on death row in countries like Indonesia. Where they're kind of tricked and fooled into, and promised jobs in a new country, and just, hey, take this suitcase with you when you go. It kind of ends up being game over for them.
Yeah, you do right. I can't find it now. About one woman, some 54-year-old mother, can't remember her name now, Haran Jahami, whatever, sentenced to death, 55-year-old. Her sentence was commuted, thankfully. But it's unclear whether she was a willing participant or whether she was conned, but I'd say she probably was a willing participant. But, I mean, you look at her life options and you say, okay, you got one chance in 100 of getting caught, 99 chance of 100 of making X amount of money, and it doesn't matter what the product does. Some people are going to take that. Some people are going to take that risk.
Well, I think she had 9 kids, right? And living in poverty. It's pretty.
So it would almost be irresponsible of her not to take that. And
whether or not you've got the education to understand what the consequences of doing it are. No,
I think probably people. I think people understand the risks. But the money's so good that they are going to take it. Okay, methamphetamine and D-amphetamine. So, what's the difference? Because is it true we're giving methamphetamine to children?
In parts of the world, they do. They absolutely do, and it's quite for kids with ADHD.
Yes.
And this was kind of a point I think we're used to in New Zealand as well. It's similar to the effect that Ritalin has on kids with.
I thought Ritalin was a form of amphetamine.
It is. Yeah. And for kids with ADHD, it really helps you settle and concentrate and focus. And
So what's
they
the
still
difference
give. They
between
still give.
amphetamine and methamphetamine?
It comes down to those different parts of the different parts, different active molecules. I'm kind of
Somebody said in a book, meth and deamphetamine,
Yep.
while molecularity different, are essentially the same drug. You wrote that.
yeah,
And you're right.
yeah,
I mean, so we are giving, on the one hand, we are giving a form of this drug to children because it helps them focus.
yeah,
And on the other hand, we are butchering young men because they want to supply it to other people to get high.
yeah. That's the drug market for you.
And we arrest about 1,500 New Zealanders a year. The vast majority of them get crushingly long custodial sentences, and it achieves absolutely nothing because, as you say, the market continues to grow. It's infuriating. Makes me so angry.
Yeah.
Not as angry
Yeah.
as tax, but it's right up there.
Well, yeah. I mean, it does kind of feel futile, doesn't it?
It is futile. Let's wind up a couple of politicians. Stuart Nash,
Yes.
who's back on the stage, back on centre stage. What was Stuart Nash famous for in your mind, in your world? He had a moment of fame. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, he did. So,
And it was good. It was a positive thing he did. And
It
let's hope
was.
He sticks to it.
he did it in a Stuart Nash style as well. So I just started working at One News and I had no annual leave, so I was working over the summer holidays. And Stuart Nash flicked me a text or gave me a call and was like, "Hey, I'm heading up to Rhythm and Vines in Gisborne, and I reckon the country, what we need to do is we need to start offering pill testing, so that people, kids out there who are going to pop an E at a festival." Can have it checked to make sure that it's safe, so they're not going to kill themselves. And I believe they just had a couple of they'd had some problems with like a pesticide getting into some drugs at that Rhythm and Vines. Stuart Nash was like, "Hey, I don't want my kids to overdose." I said Stuart Nash style because he hadn't actually run this past cabinet or had government approval
What was his ministerial responsibility?
He was police minister.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
So anyway, he kind of sowed the seeds there, and then they got blocked by New Zealand First. They wouldn't approve it. I can remember basically Derek Ball.
He was the New Zealand First Minister.
He was an MP.
MP,
at that time, and he wouldn't have a bar of it. And if you want to take drugs, well, that's stupid. And, the risk it's on you. It's a risky thing to do, and you should pay the consequences if you do that. However, at the New Zealand First AGM that year, and New Zealand First AGMs are great from a reporting point of view because you kind of get to see them debating policy. And their youth wing basically stood up. Yes, New Zealand First have a youth wing. Stood up and said,
I've
"Hey,
met some of them.
Yeah.
They're quite good guys.
Yeah,
It's really surprising.
They stood up and were like, "Hey, this is stupid. We should be backing that." And then a couple of their MPs were like, "Oh yeah, we've got teenagers. Like, we don't want them taking drugs, but we really don't want them to die."
Yeah.
And New Zealand First basically like changed their minds, and they brought in a trial, and then they kind of rolled it out more officially. And now you
What
have
has happened? Is that still the case?
that.
You can get your pills tested?
Oh, absolutely. The Drug Foundation does testing. You've got Know Your Stuff, do it at lots of festivals. Like you can pop into the Drug Foundation offices on certain days of the week, I think kind of over summer in Auckland and
Do
Wellington.
they sell it as well?
Yeah, I'll have to check. But it's quite cool. So I've been in and they basically just take a tiny little sample, put it under a machine, look at it, and then they also give you be like, "Hey, this is really, really strong. You might just want to take a quarter to start with, so you don't."
Yeah, that kids don't take drugs. But if you do, get them tested first.
Yeah.
It's good advice.
Yeah, so you don't spend 3 days a week after your speedball.
Well, that's excellent that Stuart Nash managed to come to an accommodation with New Zealand First.
Yeah, they got there in the end, right?
We'll see whether that love affair continues.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
Can we? Anyway, anything else we need to cover off?
Meth-wise? Yes.
Yes.
So they've set up, the government currently has set up a sprint team quite a few months ago. I think it's more of a slow jog. But they're trying to come up with solutions to combat what this massive increase in meth use that we've seen in the wastewater results in the last 12 months. So it was quite interesting, right? I talked about those different kilos that per week that we're using across the country. Pretty much the same month, middle of 2024, the amount of meth being used almost doubled. And logistically, it doesn't quite make sense to me because it happened almost uniformly all around the country.
Between what periods and what period?
So we were using kind of 18, 19 kilos. That was pretty consistent for quite a few years.
Yes.
Middle of last year, up into the mid-30s.
Okay, so there's a big jump at the middle of 2024, yep.
Yeah, no one can quite figure out what has happened. And logistically, it doesn't quite make sense to me that it would increase at just about every wastewater testing site across the country at the same time, like in terms of distribution networks for methamphetamine. So the government's now basically trying to come up with a plan to figure out what they're going to do about kind of skyrocketing meth use. But what the wastewater testing doesn't tell you is whether lots more people are using methamphetamine or whether, because maybe the price has come down, you've got the same people using it but using a lot more. And when you're getting people using high volumes, that's kind of when you're getting more of your kind of heavy addiction, psychosis, all those kinds of problems that comes with really heavy use of meth.
Do you have a speculation?
I don't know. I can't figure it out because it doesn't. And I've talked to the chief scientist at ESR, the wastewater testing guy, and he was like, "Yeah, we were like, man, what this doesn't make sense." So they've had all the science that they're doing here, like peer reviewed multiple times overseas. They've had it all endorsed. You could speculate on whether someone's got a new kind of supply line into the country that the authorities haven't figured out yet.
I would have thought the authorities would have some people on the ground inside the gangs, drug users, whatever. I mean, if there's been a massive spike.
Yeah, it's kind of it's all a bit weird.
Well, maybe there's a change in the composition of the product that's been imported.
That's one of the theories, is that maybe like something that came out of, they've used a new manufacturing method or something that's kind of like messing with our, basically messing with the wastewater testing results. I know a lot of the cops are pretty skeptical about this huge increase.
Yeah.
So it's going to be, interesting to get to the bottom of that.
The one thing we didn't talk about was the meth testing in houses insanity.
Yeah.
Maybe just talk briefly about that because you got caught up in that briefly.
Yeah, briefly. So my first house that I bought up in Cannons Creek, I called up the real estate agent and they were like, "Oh, there's already an offer in." And I said, "Oh, okay, no problem." And then she called back a day or two later and was like, "Hey, they've pulled out. Would you be interested in making an offer?" I was like, "Okay." And paid for the building report for a builder who had already been through. And they were like, "Oh, do you want the meth testing results as well?" I'd already done some stories on it and I thought it was nonsense. I was like, "Nah." They're like, "We just want to let you know it's tested positive for meth." But their testing was so rudimentary they couldn't tell you what levels it was at. Anyway, I bought the house. But basically what had happened is with so many people cooking meth in houses, they brought out these guidelines basically to make sure if someone had a meth lab in your house that if you cleaned it up, it was now safe to go back into. But what it basically evolved to in New Zealand was like that they were using it in houses where maybe meth was smoked or where they were just picking up tiny, tiny traces. They were evicting people from houses because they found 2, 3, 4 millionths of a gram of methamphetamine.
Just to run through that. So they said, if this place has been used as a meth lab, you need to clear it up.
Yep.
And the level of meth is what, 0.5, whatever the hell.
Millionths of a gram.
Yep.
Per square metre. Yeah.
But then they took that and they said, if you have more than 0.5 of millionth of a gram in any property,
Yeah.
we are going to consider that to be contaminated, and
Correct.
we're going to assume that you have been doing something nefarious. We're going to kick you out of the house.
Yeah.
Oranga Tamariki broke up about 800 odd families, kicked out about 800 odd families.
Yeah.
They were separating children from their parents.
They burnt their possessions because they considered those to be contaminated by methamphetamine. And, to say it was a grain of salt of meth in this house would be to wildly be overstating it, right?
Yeah.
And so, you had just these microscopic traces of methamphetamine, and they were destroying houses left, right, and centre.
And lives.
And lives to clear them up. It was just absolute insanity. Basically, eventually, when Labor, this was all happening kind of under the key Bill English government, and then Labor got an audit review. Sir Peter Gluckman came out and was like, "There's no evidence anywhere in the world that like third-hand exposure to meth causes any health issues whatsoever. This is all like kind of this wild."
And what did they do
panic.
when you exposed them?
Housing New Zealand, I'd done several years of stories on this. They were like, "No, we will not tolerate any illegal activity in our houses. We have to crack down." They were like, I remember one household, one state home people, they got kicked out. They'd found 17 millionths of a gram of methamphetamine in this house. They were fined something like $34,000 in cleanup costs. Housing New Zealand was celebrating. It was insane. And a really interesting thing that happened, I don't think they quite put two and two together, but Fair Go went out and got like $25 banknotes from around Auckland, sent them off for testing. Every single one came back with meth on it, and a lot of them are higher than like at the levels that we're kicking people out of homes, right? So there are tiny little traces of methamphetamine all around you. Even when you test the air, there are like trillionths of a gram of methamphetamine in the air that just when we walk down the road, along with like caffeine and other things in the air that you'll be breathing in.
Yeah.
And for millionths of a gram, we were evicting huge numbers of state house tenants. But also, do you remember, like, wasn't that long ago, everyone would pay for a meth test before they moved into their house, right? So the industry kind of collapsed in the wake of the Sir Peter Gluckman report, just saying, hey, unless you're 100% confident your house used to be a meth lab, you're wasting your money paying for a meth test.
It was a moment of hysteria. I thought you did excellent work on trying to bust that up. And
Thanks.
Because Housing New Zealand actually for a while just kind of doubled down. And they just said,
yeah.
No,
Hey,
we're
we're not scientists. We just have to evict people. Yeah. Yeah.
Just the stupidity. And the thing that, it's fantastic to see that pseudoephedrine is now back.
Yep. And we haven't, interestingly, I think, so it's been back for like a year now, I think we've seen maybe 2 or 3 chemists get rolled for pseudoephedrine. So it just, and that just shows there's just so much high quality, cheap meth coming in from overseas. So that kind of like domestic manufacturing hasn't really kicked up again. We're not seeing chemists being rolled like we used to.
Right. Benedict, thanks for, because I think I approached you first about doing this a year ago and then things got a bit, but it's still available.
Yep.
It's worth a read, and it's really interesting because you talk about the history of where this stuff come from.
Yeah.
And the fact that for a century, or maybe 70 years, we had been consuming this product in relatively large numbers with relatively small problems, and the problems that occurred through severe abuse, like the Shearer guy who's just completely went crazy. And it's not, well, actually, to me, it's very clear that the prohibition on this product has created more harm than it has alleviated. And I think your book, you take a more of a touchy-feely approach. You want kind of sensible regulation and health testing, whereas I would rather just
Legalise it.
just let it rip. But obviously we may disagree on that. But it's an excellent book. Thank you so much. Thank you, Benedict.
Thanks for having me.
Cheers.